So I think the recording is about to be set right now. There you go. Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a fantastic semester. My name is Ferdinando Castro, and alongside Yusha, we are both your officers for this club. As surprisingly, might seem Mansi is the advisor. I know he has a very childish face, but don't let that deceive you. He's wise sometimes, and he may be able to guide you through any philosophy endeavor that you may be facing. I'm not sure if how many of you know how we do our role or whatever, but normally we try to make this as inclusive as possible. But we already have our team pretty much selected throughout the semester. So once we share that with you, you should have a fairly idea of what topics we're going to be discussing. This is also a great way for you to start exploring those topics that you're learning during your classes in a more guided manner, let's say. We're missing a lot of conversation in our classes, or at least most of us. One way before we start introducing the topic, we do have an order to follow. So if you want to say something, I'm gonna make an example, just to make sure that you also have access to the chat. You have to go to the chat and write an exclamation mark. That way, in this case, Yusha will be first. We're gonna see who is like wanting to participate, and we can see the order so we don't skip anybody. So those who would like to raise their hand, as much as that's encouraging, that doesn't help us see who is following the order. So please just type the exclamation mark. This is just for us to explore ideas. This is a safe environment, so nothing that you will say will be like dumb or anything. So just feel free to like engage with us, and this is mostly fun. Trust me in this one. So yeah. So well, in today's topic, we are gonna be looking into reality through the lens of science. For those who attended last week's topic, we were doing the same, but through religion. Okay. So basically, what we're trying to set is like, how is it that science suggests our perception of reality, and if we can measure whether that will be the totality of what we define as truth. So I'm not sure if any of you would like to start this conversation. Otherwise, I'm always willing to do so. Or Mansi. So I will give you a couple of moments to see if any of you already have something to say.
Yeah, I'll add to that. How's it going, everybody? Professor Manzi. I encourage you all to check out the files section, especially if you're new to our Teams page, because up there we have the entire schedule for the spring 2021. Every topic for every week from now to the end of May. We have a few open topics we'll vote on every once in a while. We have times and dates for movies, for films that we'll be exploring philosophically, as well as our conference. So feel free to sort of take a look at the resources provided there. Having said that, this month's theme, so halfway through February, we're exploring reality. So last week, first day of classes, opening day, great day. We explored reality through religion, and today we're exploring it through science, or more specifically, empirical observation. So again, the thing with religion that we discovered through our conversation last week is that a lot of it is grounded in sort of metaphysics, which is to say, aspects of reality, quote unquote, that aren't necessarily perceivable or perceptible through your five senses, through the body. And that's what we mean by empirical experience that you have through your bodily senses. Science, of course, is very much rooted in empirical observation. It's rooted in, again, no pun intended, nature. It's rooted in the experiences that we encounter, again, through our various sensory organs. So if that is the way that we come to know reality initially, what might that tell us about what is real, about what is not real? What is science's standard for, again, things like truth? Does truth equal proof? So yeah, just to give it some greater context.
Yes. One question before. I see, let me see your name. Pamela, you have your hand raised, but I'm not pretty sure if you're trying to talk or you have a question. I'm not sure. Do you have your mic open?
Sorry. No, I'm just reaching for something. My bad.
Oh, that's okay. Don't worry. I'm glad that you were able to reach whatever you said that you were reaching. So okay, so I do have something to say because something that is very appealing to me in this topic, and as always, I have my main focus on trying to see if I get some answer to it. Is that normally we associate science with kind of like a clear definition of what is true. So like if we're able to prove it, then it's true. But the thing is like we have had some sort of science throughout our history as humankind, and science from time to time prove us that this is the truth. But then new science dismiss this truth and say no, this is the truth. So like how really can we attest of how Nancy was mentioning of our senses. So just because we're able to see it and touch it, can we really say that that's actually the reality? Is there a way for us to assess whether we're actually able to grasp the totality of whatever it is that is in front of us and really see this object as true in its essence, I guess, through science, I guess. So I see Orlando, you are wanted to speak, so go ahead.
Yusha, were you gonna go first? No,
Oh,
you just
that
said like
was
just
just
did
an
example.
example. We were just doing examples, yes.
Well, I think that's a little bit of a misleading way to look at science. I think science is different from religion because in the point that religion kind of starts with a proposition and it looks to prove that certain proposition. You know, it looks to essentially its aim is to kind of go in this sort of logical kind of convergence. And for science, it's different. It's not, it starts with the hypothesis, but it's literally working to disprove it. So that essentially what you're getting is you're getting a conclusion that's not going to be fixed. Rather, it's going to, if it's disproved, it's completely just let go. And so with science, it's not that you're accepting that this is the truth, but rather that you're accepting that there might be better truths. This is only the truth that we have now. And I mean, if you kind of base off that, you say, well, is it really all that great? You know, I mean, science is the reason we're literally speaking over the computer. It's the reason we fly airplanes. It's the reason for many things. And so I think when it comes to science, you're really looking at life through a naturalistic perspective. And you like the biggest, I guess, question against science or things that I can't prove is like, well, is there such things as a soul? Is there such things as metaphysics as Manzi was talking about? But then you can kind of ask that, well, is the soul even real? You know, if you're cooking something in a stove, you're making the eggs, you put your eggs and you put your oil, you put your butter or what have you, it changes texture, right? If I throw a ball, it's gonna fall down. So now, if you put the ingredients for a human inside of an organism, will it just become the human? Doesn't necessarily mean that we all have souls or that the soul even exists, or is it just a bunch of movements and motions that is just coming together in this sort of this order? You know, does it necessarily have to involve metaphysics, or is it just that this is all just some sort of coincidence, I guess you could say? And I'm gonna leave it there because I kind of don't have the right words, I feel like.
Well, there is no such a thing as the right word, but I get the general sense of what you're trying to mention. I mean, I do agree that sometimes people do approach science as a way to I guess improve the perception of reality. But as when you were mentioning that, you're also talking about different truth, and I guess in some sort we're trying to see if we can really understand reality like as it should be, which I don't think we are ever been there so far. But Yusha's next, so go ahead, Yusha.
Thanks. Uh, Orlando, as always, of course, I have to go against what you say because everything that we have in science is our own hypothesis. The only thing that is concrete and measurable is math, and we learned about math, and it wasn't. Can you guys continue? I need to take this phone call. I'll be back.
Hold on,
Okay, I'm gonna pretend I'm Yusha.
let me
I'm
react to
gonna
you.
pretend I'm Yusha.
Let me actually.
No, wait.
That's
Let me be
all
like,
right, fair
and
enough.
you have to understand, Orlando, you're wrong. Math is the only thing that is quantifiable. Prove me wrong. Go ahead. Yeah, it's your time to react now. Yeah.
I think he's trying to put together this idea of like what is it, approximation versus being concrete. I don't think necessarily that those are the same thing or it can go against each other. I mean, we can know something to a certain degree, But we still know that if I jump up in the air, I'm gonna fall back down. I still know that I can use, aeronautical engineering to fly a plane. I might not be able to explain to the very smallest, minimalistic of degree, but regardless of anything, there are laws of nature that are observable and that can be quantified to the point that I can, make things happen. So I think that's kind of a silly argument, I'll be honest.
I mean, I'm gonna try to defend Yusha to some extent. I guess in part what he's trying to suggest is like, true, we know today what that is, but maybe tomorrow we are gonna have like the ability to change gravity, and then you're not gonna be able to fall. So it's not like a certainty, but we can maybe use math to change those things. I guess
But
that's where he's
that would
trying to
only,
go.
but that would only be at the fact that we would be able to manipulate gravity, which would just be a
Yeah,
better
but
understanding. It
but
wouldn't
wouldn't
necessarily
that
disprove
then
it.
be able to manipulate reality as it is today?
I mean, to some extent, we already do. To some extent, we kind of do with, literally
Like,
in our living facilities. Manzi's next here.
Man's next is anxious. He likes his attention time. Let him have his fix. Yeah, go ahead.
What a riveting conversation. Yeah, listen, I wanted to get back to something Orlando said. And when he was relating it back to last week's topic on metaphysics and this idea of the soul, I think a lot of people would agree that maybe like the first sort of proto-scientist, like when we say scientist, what we mean by it, like sort of investigating nature and dissecting and things along these lines. You can go all the way back to Aristotle. Now, Aristotle, a student of Plato, he believed in the soul, but he disagreed with Plato's notion of it. Aristotle believed that the soul is just that thing that we refer to when we talk about a body that's animated, a body that's alive. So for Aristotle, you couldn't have a soul unless you had a body, because the body is that which brings the soul to fruition by, again, being alive. I mean, the Latin word for soul is anima. That's where we get the word animation from. It means alive. So you could have this notion of a soul that isn't necessarily at odds with a naturalistic approach to things. If you consider that, again, whatever we refer to as the soul, perhaps it's not some sort of ethereal sort of spirit or vesper or vapor or something, but perhaps it's just that which allows for the body to sort of be able to take in empirical information. For example, we refer to the soul as that which allows me to be aware of the fact that the thing I'm seeing is the thing I'm touching, is the thing I'm hearing, is the thing I'm smelling. I'm aware, I can synthesize all of these, the empirical data that's raining down upon me at all times in a way that makes the world rational. So I do think that, we need not disparage the more religious or dare we say mythical notions just yet. I think there might still be room for them in science. And in fact, all of our major early scientific philosophers at least claim to believe in something like a soul. You think of people like Descartes and Hobbes and the like.
Can
Okay.
I say something to that real quick because I know I'm going to say a lot,
Okay.
but I feel like
Very
often with these sort of like big words like soul or mind, they were sort of these placeholder words for concepts and inner workings that we just didn't understand. When you talk about the mind, well, what is the mind? Brain and the mind is not necessarily the same thing. They don't have the same context. The brain, it's a specific organ that has many, many kinds of facilities and chemical reactions and so on and so forth. So really, it seems like we started with this concept of the mind, of the soul, but then when we actually went into science, started understanding how it works, then we adopted certain specific, concepts of it. And now you kind of ask yourself, well, does the mind, the soul, like, do we really even need that? Do we need to understand that? Is it just another word for things like consciousness?
Oh, okay. Thank you, Luis. I'm gonna try to work that out. So yeah, if you have her email, please DM me her email so I can make sure that she can come over here. All right. But yes, that's very insightful as always, Orlando. And I saw that Bria is next. So go ahead and then I can read what Yusha was trying to say.
Hello. It actually goes back to what the guy said before about Aristotle's view of the soul. and I'm having a hard time understanding like their point of view on the soul. So what was exactly Plato's view of the soul? I was kind of lost in that section.
Okay. When you say the guy, I'm assuming it's Mansi. Nice touch. I like that. And let's try to refer him as that guy.
I didn't
So
get to catch
yes.
his name, but I kind of caught when he was speaking on
No, it's
Aristotle's
fine.
view.
Don't worry. Just the guy. That guy is good. That guy is perfect. So would you like
Yeah,
to address the? Okay.
happy to respond. And again, not to go off on too much of a tangent, but yeah, I mean, just briefly, it's kind of a different take. So I spoke about Aristotle and Plato, and you were wondering about Plato, or you were wondering about both of them?
It was about both of them. Like, what was their perspective on the soul? I heard Aristotle's name, but I didn't hear Plato's name.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Well, I mean, just really briefly, but there's so much to what I'm about to say, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, Plato is typically referred to as a dualist. So he believed that the body and the soul were two separate entities. That, in fact, the body was sort of in some ways, a hindrance to the soul. Aristotle, who was Plato's student, believed that no, the body and the soul they work together to form a single unit. So they're two different things in I guess potential, but in order to unlock the potential, they need one another. So it's their unity in duality, if that makes sense. So this is why Aristotle will say things like, without the body, you can't have a soul. And without a soul, you have a body that's alive, you just have a corpse, a cadaver, something like that.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. That makes a lot of sense.
No problem. Stick around for philosopher hours. We have after the meeting where the student officers will be happy to answer questions or, offer tutoring, elaborate on stuff, continue the conversation.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. Don't worry. But yes, for those who are here in looking into clarifying more questions like those, yes, the officers and I mean, if the advisor is also available, we're trying to stay after the meeting ends so we can clarify specific questions that you may have. I already resigned. I also designed, a form. So if later after this meeting it's not a good time for you, or maybe you're just too much into like, okay, it's enough meeting. We can also have more, I guess, individual meeting with you all based on the availability of the officers, of course. So I already did that, and I will be sharing that with you soon. Okay, so I'm working right now on the email. I'm not complete. Let me see if somebody else has. Okay, but I can read what Yusha was mentioning, unless Orlando you want to like add that. But I do have a comment. Yusha is kind of suggesting that the only real thing in existing is math and nothing else because that's what we created. But we also have to understand the fact that I mean, I don't know if we created math, but someone created us and other aspects. So I mean, I think there's a couple of points that we could certainly mention about that comment. And now everyone is just texting. So Orlando, would you mind saying what you're trying to like text so I can send the link to Luisa Benton's professor very quick? I'm trying to give her access to.
I mean, I'm just repeating what I said to Yusha basically before, that like degree of certainty is involved. I mean, just to reemphasize, with religion, it's like you start at the conclusion. Here's my conclusion. My logic now is wrapped around my conclusion, proving this conclusion. But when it comes to something like science, you don't start at a conclusion, rather you start at a hypothesis, and you're either proving it or disproving it. And so constantly with science, the reason people say it's changing, it changes, well, then how is the truth if it's changing? Well, that's the point. It's the emphasis on understanding that what we know is not going to stay the same because we're going to learn more and more as we go through time. And essentially, just like how you kind of look at evolution for humanity, it's like it's emphasizing the best concepts of or the best traits of humanity. With science, it's like you're emphasizing what seems to hold the most consistent truth, regardless of everything else that works against it. And that's how, once again, we have all the technology that we have, all the concepts and knowledge that we have. And math works in the exact same way. Math works in the same way where essentially all of these different equations and numbers that are arrived at by different points all have to be consistent regardless of how different they are. And that's how science works as well. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
But but you cannot dismiss that one reality is better or it is over the other, because you keep bringing up the points between religion and science. But last week we had already talked about the reality through the perspective of religion, and this time around it's science. So with science in question, I'll give the same example that I had given before. Do we or do we not dismiss a person's quote unquote reality who is suffering through some sort of mental illness? Because I personally have studied cases where people wake up from these nightmares and they describe it, and a couple of days later they have those same scarring or markings on their bodies. So isn't that their reality? Or someone who suffers from excessive hallucination, sleep paralysis, sleepwalking, all these kind of things that we just dismiss because it's science or we don't know enough about it yet. So that is my entire argument, where is one person's reality superseding another person's? Because see, if someone comes in and they tell me that, oh, I got these scars in my sleep, and I'll be like, come on, man, you're just being stupid. It doesn't happen. That's not real. So that's my reality because it does not happen to me. But for that person, it is their entire world because it does happen to them.
So it really depends on how you're choosing to look at reality. If you're wanting to look at reality through this lens of, okay, it's essentially non-existent, it's only different through everybody else's perception and eyeglass, and we don't live in a physical world, we live in a simulation. Your argument, yeah, it makes complete sense because it's different for everyone. But if you want to come at it from an approach to say, okay, well, we live in a physical reality where there are fully functioning human beings, and there are human beings that might have mental disorders or aren't necessarily capable of understanding or of essentially acting as humans, I guess you could say, or fully functional humans, then that's where that comes into play to say is that, okay, if there's someone who is seeing people that aren't actually there and everyone else saying it's not there, that person might have a mental disorder. It's just as simple as that. It's nothing really. It's not a
we
really
say
like
that
amazing
person has a mental disorder, but we only because we are in a majority, that's why we are stand corrected.
It's not the majority. It's something that
we could be lacking
it's
those
in psychology, and it actually can be measured. You can actually find the brain.
We could be lacking the
and diagnose it
photoreceptors and
through
the mental
psychology, so
capacity
on and
to
so
see
forth.
those.
Well, I don't want
Okay,
to argue anymore.
Wait a
'cause
moment.
this
Wait a
makes
moment.
sense.
Order in the table. We need order in this table. My goodness gracious, it's unbelievable. What kind of example are we setting to these new students? The right type of excitement. Okay, you need to be able to fight like this. You need to be able to do this. So yes, okay, but one at a time. Okay, so I don't know. There was a moment I was just hearing blah 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 blah, and that's not an argument here. That's not philosophizing. That's just argument. So yeah. So can we then say that both of you are wrong? Mm-hmm.
Let's go to the queue. I think Catherine wanted to say something.
Let's go to the queue. Orlando, I'll talk to you later.
Yeah. So I just wanted to put something out there that most people, I feel that when they think about science, they see it as a rational alternative to religion and all, those kind of crazy, or not crazy, but just religious views. And but I also feel like religion and science, they kind of do the same thing where they're both kind of like I don't know how to explain it. They're both kind of just ideas. You can't really prove either of them because there are some theories in science where we're never going to be able to know if they're true or not. So I just that they're more similar than we think they're different.
Yeah, and the chat is just lasting today. And yeah, and we were actually looking into it like last session. We actually stopped talking in that regard because it was kind of diverging outside from religion. But we were looking into like there are specific elements of what that we use to understand our environment that we were approaching the idea of like maybe they help us look into a specific set of realities. So for instance, let's say that science help us understand maybe the more material type of whatever is it that is happening surrounding us. But maybe for some people, like religion could be something that can help you understand what you cannot touch. It's something that is more like a spirit that it happens to you, and you can have like a maybe an idea, but there is nothing that you can use to measure that yet. So it's kind of like there are maybe different approaches. And the example that we were using last week was like, for example, if something happened to your bone, you have to use like an X-ray to see that, but the X-ray will skip the muscle. So that doesn't mean that the muscle is not there, but it's not looking into that specific section. So
Can I
I
piggyback on
yeah,
that
go
real
ahead.
quick? Yeah,
Yes.
and I like that. I like what you had to say, Catherine. I think that's a good point. I will say this, on the sort of touching point between religion and science. Again, it's keeping in mind the ancient notion of again science. So the Greek word for nature is physis. It's where we get the word physics from. It's the study of nature and specifically the laws of nature. So the thing about science is that its truths are concretely demonstrable. You can conduct experiments. You can conduct 3 or 4 or 40 experiments in a row and continually test something, and you have all of the details, all the variables at your disposal, and then you can prove something like a law of motion. You can prove something that, while the law itself isn't necessarily visible because it's a rational concept, you can see it in action. You could observe it, and it doesn't necessarily matter on that level what your religion is. Everybody is living in this same physical reality, and everybody is subject to the same laws thereof. So this is what starts as the basis for science, as the basis for reality. It's that, well, irregardless of our metaphysical presuppositions, we nonetheless can all agree that there's a law of gravity. And we could prove it. We could use the math to help us then demonstrate it with physical objects in a physical world. So I think for the same reason, you could also say, well, this is why religion and science are compatible, because religion can, again, compel you via faith to believe in justifications for the experiences that you are encountering in the physical world, sort of like why the physical world is what it is, which is, something different from science, which science says, what is the physical world? Not why is it necessarily, but what is it?
Okay, good. I'm gonna say this. The chat today is amazing. The only thing is like it's so long. So normally I read it, but for example, Jennifer just texted something that is really good, but it's too long to read. So I encourage you to also read that as we continue the conversation. But yeah, thank you, Nancy, for giving a little bit more of direction on the conversation. Again, for those who have come new, because I have seen that several of them have come after we already explained how we do things, just type an exclamation mark on the chat. If you cannot chat, just let me know with like your voice. So we have the order of those who are going to be speaking. Okay. Yes, but okay. I just finished writing the emails. Sorry. I lost track of the conversation. That shouldn't happen. Okay, but I do agree with something that Nancy was mentioning. That we do live in a specific place where we all are bound to the same natural laws, and we use science in a sense to understand how this happens, and so we kind of like define what reality is based on what our knowledge is in that moment. But there are also other aspects that we still cannot prove, but when we recognize them as truth. And in this case, you can kind of like, can we say that that's outside of science to approach if we just don't have like we're just not there yet when it comes to science, to be able to understand the part of reality. There you go. And I see also Orlando want to speak.
I did kind of just want to clear something up. Like, in saying that science, the way that it functions, I'm not saying that it's essentially has a better concept of reality. I don't think that at all. I think a good way to look at science is sort of like, you're thrust into this world where physical existence exists, and there's a manipulation to it, and we've sort of just kind of come upon this manipulation of it. And so we kind of were like, I feel like we were lucky in that sense that we managed to make things, to figure out how things work, and so we've done it in our benefit for us to survive. And so going based off that, I mean, it kind of, the way I see science and reality is like it kind of expands our understanding of reality. Long ago, maybe we were sort of this primitive civilization that looked at the sun and said, "Man, this is a magical sun that's providing life." And it was just, that's like our very notion of the sun was very simplistic, very minimal. And so, but now we don't think about just the sun. We don't think about just the stars. We think about the universe as a whole, and even existences of multiple universes, reality, so on and so forth. And all these concepts of these multiple universes, reality, so on and so forth, we do this because we have a different understanding of science. A good point that Yusha was bringing up is like the Higgs boson particle. Our very understanding of classical physics, we thought was concrete. We thought it was just, this is the way it is. But when the Higgs boson came around, it completely dwarfed everything. We've essentially started to see the world completely different. We started thinking, oh, maybe, is there a different existence? Can time travel exist? So on and so forth. So like these very sci-fi, like faith-based concepts come from science. And so like it's the same in the sense that the more we learn, the more we get to question reality. And in that sense, I would say it's similar to religion, because with religion, once again, you can't observe it, but you will believe it.
Yeah, I like that. Because it also kind of like connect what we were mentioning last week. To some extent, it's like, and I think Mansi was talking about that in like last week as well. That like uh, science has been some sort of response of religion trying to like prove whether or not those ideas are kind of like feasible or something. I may be paraphrasing him wrongly in this regard. So I apologize if I'm not doing due credit to your own words. But yes, I do agree that it does help us understand that our reality is not as fixed as we thought, and hopefully some of us are. So it does increase our likelihood to start like being more adaptable to whatever is it that comes afterwards. Hi, Bao. Hi, good. Feel free to just
But
say it. Mm-hmm.
I will say, I mean, in response to Orlando, and really, I guess to everybody who's contributed so far to the combo, this idea of science does seem to rest on, again, our ability to, or our capabilities of empirical observation through our five senses. What about the notion that our senses can deceive us? I mean, how reliable really are our senses? If that is the bedrock of how we, again, sensory data is constantly raining down upon us at all times, we're able to sort of aggregate it and organize it, is what our mind does, spit it back out, and then we have a coherent picture of reality. But isn't it possible that our senses aren't reliable enough to justify their being the bedrock for everything? I mean, how many times have your senses deceived you? I mean, does it
Maybe
happen?
all the time. Maybe all the time. Maybe we're being deceived right now.
Yes, exactly. I mean, right now it looks like there's nothing between me and my cell phone, but we know through science that there's actually all these particles. I just can't see that. My senses are deceiving. They're leading me to believe there's nothing there, when in fact there's a lot of things that are there. So, I mean, I only bring this up to sort of add a wrinkle to the conversation here. I mean, if we can't rely on our senses fully, if we can't have rational faith in our senses most of the time, or even if you can't do it for some of the time, should it really be, I guess, the sort of the cornerstone for all of knowledge, for information, for our notion of reality, how we build our hypotheses?
Yeah, and I believe that part of what you're mentioning is also the reason why science is also there, because as you said, like, okay, true, we may be all like human beings, but we receive the information very differently based on our own experiences. So sometimes the same object may be perceived from us like differently. Let's say some people have a negative reaction to coffee, but others actually like a love set. So for them, it's kind of like but through science, we're able to kind of like see it and kind of like have or at least try to have a combined idea of what that object should be for all of us, like without any doubt. So it's really like a try for us to unify our sense of reality, because if we don't do this, everyone will be perceiving reality differently and very individualistic. So it's kind of also a way for us to be able to organize our information. And I see that Pamela is wanting to speak, so go ahead, Pamela.
Hi. On the the note of like our senses and everything that you brought up, Ms. Manzi, what about
That
like
guy.
human? Oh, that guy, yeah. What about like human intuition and everything, such as like being able to read a scenario before it even happens and everything, like how some people are able to supposedly predict the future just by looking at how things are setting up to become, if that makes sense.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not. That was a direct question to Mansi. Oh, that guy.
I mean, it's yes, and also like if anybody else also wants to put their ideas on the table.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll defer to the students, and then I'll say
You
something.
defer to the students. Okay, that's a
Can I
very
ask
clever
something?
way
Hey,
to avoid the
Pam,
question.
so what do you mean by intuition? Like, do you mean like Nostradamus, kind of like a prophet? Is that what you're referring to, or I'm kind of confused on that.
I mean, it could be, I guess, prophets if you want to bring in religion and everything, due to the fact that there have been instances where like people have guessed things before they become, and that type of thing, and like how.
But it doesn't have to be religion.
Yeah, no,
Um,
it isn't. But
Can I reply to that? I don't know. I guess I'll take the stance from a rational way or for science or whatever. If you want to call it that, I don't think that's a thing. But I'll just say, I think there's a way to like there's a certain way like are people psychic? Are people really magicians? Some psychics, quote unquote, have this ability to kind of generalize people very accurately, so that they'll say certain phrases that'll really spread widely. And so someone is bound to catch that. Someone is bound to say, "Oh, I relate to that. He must be psychic because he knows specifically what I'm going through." But really, it was more of a net that was cast of like of what's most likely to happen. And so, like with these prophets, what you can see is that you can kind of throw out there this hypothesis or this prediction that was most likely to happen, and then it did happen, and then people just believed it. They believed that he had to have known it for certainty through some magical way, when in reality he kind of just guessed it.
okay.
Yeah, no,
I
I hear what you're
All
saying.
right.
I think she means something along the lines of like you get a bad feeling all of a sudden, and you're like, I don't know why I feel like this, but I feel like something bad's about to happen, and then something bad happens. I think that's kind of what
Yeah.
she's getting by intuition.
I would say it's a
I-
fight or flight response. That's like an animalistic instinct. That's what I would say.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say something kind of similar. I would maybe throw out there that well, not so much, I guess, instinct, but instinct that comes from repeat experiences. So if you have experienced something similar over and over again, you can begin to almost intuitively recognize the signs based on previous experiences before they unfold. That's actually what Aristotle argues. That it's this interesting sort of combination of practice, if that makes sense. Familiarity might be another way to put it, and then also as you're getting at this sort of response mechanism.
Yeah. But I do believe that what Orlando was mentioning, I'm gonna try to keep it short since we have other people on the queue.
Yeah, the queue
I think yeah, the queue is growing. It's growing. I'm so glad when I see that happening. But I think both of you are kind of like getting to the same point without noticing it. Because yes, the practice and the like maybe kind of like animalistic or whatever. But the things like what Pamela is trying to suggest is like, for example, let's say like you like you have a premonition. I'm gonna smell food in 30 minutes, and in 30 minutes exactly, just gonna happen. it's like, I guess if you keep trying and trying and trying, sometimes you're gonna get it right, but that doesn't mean it's like you are able to foresee it. It's kind of like your mind is so into it that eventually you get it right, and then you really start paying attention to every time you get it right. I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
So it kind of like you adjust your reality to kind of like think that you are able to go into it all the time, and then so we see these people. It's like, I don't care in this because I know that this person is suffering in here. Like, well, if you're always thinking that he's gonna suffer, eventually he's gonna be suffering. So I mean, it's a way to see it. But yes, now in the queue I see. I'm not sure how you want me to name you. I'm just gonna call you Osita. So Osita, there you go, Osita. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. That's perfect. Thanks. I wanted to say something else, but I wanted to like piggyback off of this most recent question by Pamela. Um, uh, I remember this maybe like a year ago. I was reading some pop science article about scientists figured out that there's this very low frequency that makes humans naturally afraid. And that might be why, haunted houses have this really scary feel around them or something like that. And they hypothesize that, maybe there's a fan somewhere in the neighborhood or in the building that's giving off this low frequency or some other instrument or mechanism. And like, this may be the same frequency that like predators would give off in our like prehistory. And so maybe we're like naturally attuned to like just be afraid of something that we can't even perceive, um and so I was like, well, maybe it's like and this is going to go into like how I sort of take everything. What I originally want to say is like, maybe it's all of the above. Like maybe there are ghosts, maybe it's also like the predator frequency, maybe it's just a very negative frequency that we have for multiple reasons learn to be afraid of. It's probably predators though, right? That makes sense. But I thought it was interesting because like, well, there are no predators in haunted houses. So why do certain whatever? Why are there haunted places? It's weird, but it could be like a fan, like they said in the article. But what I wanted to originally say was, if I can remember, yeah. I think I personally think it's. I personally am cautious about thinking anything concrete about the universe that we live in. Besides like math, the things that we know. Just because, to your point of like, well, quantum physics kind of like knocked classic Newtonian physics out of the water for the most point. We don't know in this infinite universes of universes what else might be knocked out of the water. And I think it's weird that there's this meme of a soul, I guess, in humanity. And while there's no concrete evidence for it, I think it's maybe not, I don't know if it's right to say there's no reason to not search for it with all the tools that we have and all the tools that we may acquire 1,000 years into the future, I guess. There are certain things that keep popping up in humanity. Same thing with evolution. Like eyes have evolved multiple times independently all around the world in different like species. It's weird that certain memes, and not just religion, but just certain things regarding community and social structure that seem to have evolved multiple times naturally in different pockets of humanity and even pre-humans. And it's like, well, maybe there's a reason why that was important, just like that low frequency. We're not worried about predators, but still, maybe there was a reason once upon a time why. So clearly I'm not making any concrete assertions. I'm just saying, keep them, anything is possible, pretty much. But yeah.
Can I respond to that real quick? I'm going to be real quick. I really like what you said there. I think that's a good point. Something I always like thought about and agreed with is that like, I don't think necessarily science is disproving things like metaphysics or the soul. Possibly it's something that we have just yet to get to. That could be a thing. And also kind of what Pamela was saying here about kind of like how reality is different because everyone has different experiences and they perceive it differently. Well, I think here's a good distinction, is that science is looking to look at the objective, while morality, religion is subjective. Like you can have a painting that is green, blue, red, and someone might say it's nice, it's beautiful colors, and someone else is going to say it's ugly. The idea of beautiful and ugly is the subjective part, or the religious or moral part, while the fact that it's red, blue, or green is the science part. It just objectively is that.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I'm gonna purposely not add too much because I just read that there is someone who got a little bit late into conversation and it's a little bit confused. It's so fun whenever my dogs start doing something and my mom starts saying no. So I apologize. It's just my dogs. So it's not me being mean to anyone or anything. So yes, in essence, Isidora, we're just trying to understand reality through the lenses of science, as it's been said there. So we're trying to see how science kind of like suggest our how we perceive reality to be. That's like the most short version of what I can say. I also saw that Eugene is next in the queue. So I'm sorry they took so long for you to speak. So go ahead and speak. Wanted to feel like you have
No,
also time.
no need to apologize. It was really interesting. I was glad to be a part of it. But I kind of wanted to, I mean, I originally was kind of piggybacking off of, the conversation that Pamela and Orlando were having, and then sort of adding to what Osita is saying, realizing that Orlando's kind of coming in a different place, at a similar place. So I'm basically kind of trying to like generalize a lot of the thinking to get straight at it was
No,
that,
you're fine.
to get straight at you were talking about Pamela, basically saying do you think that we're just going to discount all the things about human intuition, the things that we can't prove about the ways that humans feel and think, because we know these other scientific things and we can't really say concretely that it means anything, so should we discard it? And I think to kind of offer a general framework for how do we kind of harmonize that, not just on a case by case basis, but just to think about it, in the general terms, is that, uh, there's a lot of things in science that we just don't understand, right? And you talked about how, um, I think Orlando, you talked about how we perceive things differently even. So you talk about, somebody might see a picture that's red, green, and blue, and the scientific thing, the objective thing is that it's red and green, and the subjective thing is whether it's blue or whether it's beautiful or ugly. And really, even to get more into it, the the subjective thing is even whether it's blue or green, because scientifically, I mean, we can perceive these colors in any sorts of way, and there are plenty of colorblind people. It's just the way that, our eyes work tends as humans to see it as red or blue. And even I think there's, stuff about how if you grown up in cultures that have, typically more shades of a particular color, you'll see it different and it changes the way you perceive these things. I think generally the way that we actually should be coming at it is just kind of with a more humble understanding to say, well, we don't really know much. We don't even know what the purpose of the appendix might have been, however long ago, right? So it's like when it comes to things like human intuition, there are definitely sort of the examples of things that you can disprove straight out, right? Like the guy that comes on some sort of variety show and says, I can move these pages of a book with my mind so long as the energy is right in the room. We know that the guy's just blowing on it or whatever. Exactly, like, right.
Yeah.
Or using static electricity. But, we can also say that there's some things, right? Like, why is it that you're even freaked out in the presence of a haunted house? Maybe it is a fan going, but just kind of coming with the understanding that there's so many things that we don't understand that it's just like, well, it could be. And until then, I think it's perfectly acceptable to just sort of accept things in the gaps, which is just to say that, people just sense things sometimes, if you want to put it that way.
Okay. But I believe, and I guess I'm talking a little bit here in behalf of Orlando. I don't necessarily believe that Orlando is trying to dismiss the whole idea of like being perceptive in a very abstract manner, but he's trying to suggest like science is trying to like see how that happened, but the whole like
Right.
idea of like how it happens is extra. he's just trying to suggest like science is really like trying to focus on a specific why. So like for example, let's say that it's true, since we are already trying to agree that we are humble enough to admit that we understand nothing. So like what he's trying to see is like science may be able to eventually pinpoint a specific part in the brain that activate anytime that you have that feeling, and it might be actually connected. So maybe it's able to even trace that you are somehow spiritually connected to whatever is it that is making you feel that way, and you are able to see it physically. But right now it's just really a hunch, which I think is more like what Pamela was trying to see. Like, how can you explain that hunch? But talking about also there in the queue, so go ahead.
Yeah, no, like with I basically kind of wanted to hear what everybody had to say, honestly, and also what I mean, I'm a very much a like if I see it, I believe it type of person. Like I'm not really big on
How many
religion and
fingers
everything.
did you
So,
see here?
yeah, 3 right there.
No, there is 5. Oh, come on. I have a full thing. You're failing in that right now. Okay,
Yeah.
continue, please. I didn't want to
No, you're
intervene.
fine. You're fine. But yeah, no, like I've, the last class I took was psychology, so they actually dived into the idea of human intuition and how people, with Monty was saying, he was like saying how the more you see it, the more you're exposed to and everything, and that does come to show and everything. But then there's also the idea of how our I guess, animalistic senses that we might still carry, even though it's been like years and years since, we evolved from being a caveman to, just a normal citizen in the city and everything. Not a lot of, we still carry those type of instincts as like, the sense of like, hey, I have a feeling this person is, not good. Maybe I should, step away from them and everything. And, if you ever play like, actually, who plays like horror games or something like that? Okay, yeah, like whenever you're playing the game, yes, you're aware that this is going to spook you and everything, but then there's, that fight or flight response of like, hey, I hear somebody walking. That's not good.
Yeah, but all of it has an explanation too, though. Like it depends also on how your youth was and everything. And there are some people who are just not scared at all of those type of games. But like for example, in the whole haunted, I like there, and I think it was Asita who is actually in the queue right now. That was mentioning the whole concept of being afraid in front of a hunter or anything. I mean, as a species, we have been hunted before, so part of that is in our DNA. So that response comes as a sort of already learned mechanism that we have already like inside of us. So you have a specific reason why that it can also be somewhat proved through science. But I don't know if Rosita was trying to clarify something in there, so I know you're next. So go ahead, please.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to respond to what Pamela was saying. With that, I think without like sounding too woo-woo or whatever, it seems that like maybe call it intuition, but humanity has maybe dulled their perception, maybe through just the course of evolution, because, for instance, like we still give off pheromones, but the effect just isn't as strong as it is for other animals. We can't like smell, we can't know that we're smelling pheromones unless like I guess you literally wear like a lot of pheromones or musk or something like that. But it still has an effect on us. If you still go out with your friends, you're happier. Your brain chemistry is different. Even though you're all sort of separate beings, you also have like an effect on each other. And I always thought that. Well, anyway, yeah, I'll leave that.
No,
there.
it's okay. I will add something before I put I let Orlando go. It is funny that you mentioned that because I mean I'm here trying to just point out different aspect of what we're talking, so it keeps like the ball keep rolling. But there's some things that I cannot explain myself. I have been putting myself into very scientific right now. But for example, I have a twin brother, and like we are actually able to connect while we're sleeping. And the reason why we know is not even because we're kind of like It's because my mom has saws. Like we sometimes like we're talking like next to each other, but we're all sleeping. Like we're sleeping, but we're like communicating to each other, and we don't know how that happened. It just happened. So there is that type of connection that I don't think there is any science right now that can explain, but it's there, and it's even when we're in the least conscious aspect of our day. When you're sleeping, you're not really using your mind in that regard. So just as a suggestion. But all right. So I know Orlando is next, so go ahead.
Ferdinando, I think, I mean, you brought up a good point to say, like, with these, I think, I'm trying to think of how to say this. There's like this very pessimistic outlook on science that it's like supposed to be rational and it's pessimistic in that. But I think with science, and it brings about new questions that are so interesting and makes you really wonder, what is the extent of reality that we understand and how much more is there to find? When you talk about things like sort of this hive mind consciousness, how does that work? Does it exist? How could we, if we understand it through science or understand it, period, how could we ever use it? How could we use this idea of a hive mind? That alone is sort of so interesting to me, and science brings about these questions, like when you go and you think about like how lucky it is that we are here on Earth, the fact that we have a moon, the fact that we are at the specific right amount away from the sun, and we have just the right amount of oxygen, so on and so forth. It's like these beautiful, small, intricate details as to why we're here. That in and of itself seems to be religious. That makes you feel like, man, there must be a reason as in why this is here. That kind of provides you with faith. And that's why I don't think it necessarily clashes with science. I mean, with religion. I think it can actually go hand in hand in that sense. There seems to be a beauty to this sort of chaotic order, if you would say. But yeah.
Excellent point. Yes, I do believe also that both connect each other, and they respond to each other too. And Mansi is next, and then Viridiana or Rico. I don't want to say Rico because it has some specific connotation in Spanish. So like Rico. So I'm just gonna go with Viridiana for now.
Yeah, I want to second Orlando's sentiments, but also kind of challenge something he said earlier. But before I do, again, just to make the announcement one more time, we made it at the beginning of the meeting. So the Philosophy Club will meet every Tuesday from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. So the last couple semesters, we started at 3:30. This semester, we're starting at 3. Now, of course, it's very informal. You could show up late, you could leave early, you could do both. It's totally fine. So don't feel like you have to be here right when the meeting starts. It's all good. But having said that, so we're at 4 o'clock is what I'm trying to say. So if the conversation is going a little long and you got to go, don't feel like you have to stay until it's over. It's totally fine. And of course, all of these are recorded in the Teams page, so you can always go back and what'd you say? You can always go back and listen to the conversation.
You have to stay. You have to stay. They have to stay until we say so. There's no freedom here. This is a dictatorship. Once you get in here, you're doomed. It was a trap. Now you have to listen to us.
Okay, but I will say this, and it had to do with this notion of objective versus subjective. So, Orlando, when you said earlier that the science studies the objective, and then subjective is more things like morality. What if we can conclude that morality is derived from the objective laws of physics? So, for example, if we can prove through empirical observation that I don't know, dropping a bowling ball on my toe is painful, and we understand what causes pain. We understand that one body colliding into another body with a nervous system and nerve endings, that causes pain, and that is an unpleasant experience. Well, then we can begin to derive an ethics, which says, okay, you should not inflict pain on other people because we can prove scientifically that it's deleterious for our bodies. So this could be where ethics comes from. It's derivative of the objective laws of physics that we all are subject to because we are physical. So I don't know if there's that like deep of a inconnect or a disconnect between objective and subjective in this regard. I think you can have a naturalist based ethics or morality, however you want to put it, and it need not include any theological supplement. Okay.
Quick
Yeah.
response to you real quick. That's exact. You know me. I kind of agree with you completely. That's what I said last week. I was like, morality derives from nature in that sense. I said that too. But I don't think people necessarily agree with that. I think people will say, "Oh, well, what if you have some guy who enjoys pain? What if you had, there's always that one person that's gonna say, "Oh, well, everything is subjective. People might enjoy pain. People might enjoy this, might enjoy that. So morality isn't, so you're always gonna have that sort of underlying room for error. So I don't know if
Yeah,
necessarily
but
that is true.
that is the reason why I was mentioning that through science, I guess, to some extent, we're trying to have a unifying factor, because if we just let everybody choose those kind of things, then we don't really have a specific reality to make decisions at all. But yes, without trying to make this too extensive, Viridiana, you're next.
Well, hi everyone. I just want to kind of like put out there that I was hearing a lot of science and religion. And I usually think that there's going to be always different opinions whether these two subjects can like coexist. Religion and science will offer like explanations for why life and the universe exists, right? And for one part, science relies that there's evidence and observations, while religion relies on subjective belief in a creator, right? So I personally grew up in Mexico, and over there with my Hispanic family, I grew up believing more in religion than science. An example that I believe more in religion is that right now with the COVID and all that, my family does not believe on that. They think it's like a lie. So this conversation was really like interesting to hear. That's all I wanted to say.
Yes, no, for
Thanks for
me, there
sharing
is
that.
this.
Yeah.
No, yeah, thank you. But there is something funny for me that I keep laughing, because I have those people who is like, that's a hoax. Corona? What? That doesn't exist. But they're still afraid of it. They're still kind of like, but they take their measure even if they don't recognize it. So it's that dualistic between like don't wanting to believe, but recognizing that it's still there. So it's kind of like it's messing with how they perceive the reality of the coronavirus. In this case, is we're trying to look into it. But all right. As much as I would like to continue this conversation, I do want to be mindful of your time. It's nice that you're mentioning Osita Tomás Aquinas. My high school is Tomás Aquinas.
Can,
Yeah, but
that's a good
that
point.
doesn't
That's a
go.
really good point. We should because he says this in his view, he felt that God gave man logic, so he should use it. Now, I think that's interesting because I've always shared like the same perspective is like, well, if God exists, wouldn't he be like the ultimate scientist, if not more than that? Think about the laws of nature and our understanding of science. If God exists, then he designed that. He did the calculus. He did the physics, so on and so forth. So what if we're just like tracing our steps back to that? I'm gonna end there.
And
Okay.
well, and also keep in mind the element of faith that you have in your local scientists, and all of your scientific experts, you might say. So again, if you go to the doctor and they diagnose you with a disease, you don't know anything about the disease, but you trust that they know the science. It's very similar to the way you might trust a religious authority about things that you don't really know or are unclear. So that you still have an element of faith, even if you go purely naturalistic, especially nowadays. I want to also like include that, tack that on.
Okay. So yes. So well, again, thank you so much for coming. It's been a pleasure to have this meeting with all of you. If you want to just continue having some sort of a conversation, feel free to stay, since as an officers, we're trying to just answer to more specific questions if you may, but feel free to leave if you need to or want to too, since basically the meeting is already over. So thank you so much. I will, I guess, I'm gonna use Nancy's words to try to like have some sort of consistency in these videos. It's like, think about it. I know, ridiculous, but we have to come up with something new. Nancy gonna have just the last word in this case. No, it's still one.
Oh
Check
But
us
man,
well,
out.
yes.
that's rough.
Check us out on social media. If you want to know where to find us on social media, go to the files in our team's page. Click on the document that has the spring schedule. You can see we're on We're on YouTube. We've done
Yes.
6 or 7 semesters of these. There's 80 or 90 episodes
Next-
up on YouTube.
Follow us
Next
on
week is
Instagram.
going to be co-constituting the real reality and perception.
Yes, that's going to be a fantastic topic. I'm excited for that one.
Everyone follow us on Instagram. It's DC Philosophy Club. Literally just DC Philosophy Club. You know, we need the likes.
Like us, please.
Like and subscribe.
Thanks for coming,
Let's
especially
go.
to the newbies. Thanks for coming.
Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
thank you.
Thank you.
And again, if you want to discuss something more particular, we're gonna be here. If not, that's fine too. Just giving you time to organize whatever question you may have. Well, yeah, that was great.
I'm meeting. You could probably kill the recording.
Yeah.
Oh, you should just
Oh,
left.
that's true.
That's messed up. You should-
He had